Kelowna, one of the most beautiful places in the world to live, surrounded by provincial parks, pine forests, vineyards, orchards, and mountains. Wouldn't it be great if there was a podcast about our love of Kelowna? Oh no, it's real. This is I Love Kelowna, an interview-style podcast about the fabulous and fascinating people that make up our great city and the Okanagan. Intimate conversations with entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, creatives, and anyone who has an interesting story to tell about how they're contributing to our wonderful home. This is I Love Kelowna, and here's your host, Luke J. Menkes.
So you've learned many lessons, which you've covered in the first segment of our, I guess, two-part podcast. Mm-hmm. Your very interesting life. And so I had asked you the question, what lessons you've learned from your daughters. You have two beautiful daughters.
That's it's kind of a tough question because I'm still living in the experience of having two daughters, you know. Mm-hmm. I can definitely say that having daughters encouraged me to keep going. And I think I did cover that in the first show because it was really, really difficult. But one thing they definitely taught me was patience. I had no patience. And with little kids especially, you got to be patient. It's a challenge again now because my oldest is a teenager. And the constant thought in my brain is she should know better. And I have to relearn patience again. When you're dealing with a toddler or an infant, patience, you have to learn it pretty quickly. But it's easy because you have so much love for them and they're so completely helpless, right? Yeah. I think it's pretty easy to say, okay, I got to be more patient, right? With a teenager, for me, it's a whole brand new challenge because I think I've already taught you this lesson. You know, why are you giving me attitude? And I got to be patient because I remember being a teenager and I was an asshole myself. You know what I mean? So maybe it's karma. I don't know. But, you know, they taught me how to look at the world through a child's eyes again, you know, because we get so busy and so concerned about the daily things of life and everything is serious. You know, we can have fun, but fun is like a special occasion for an adult, you know, whereas with kids, everything is fun or they try to make it fun. And that's really a good thing. I think no matter what you're doing, working, you should try to be having fun. I'm not saying like goof off and be frivolous when someone is, you know, making $1 million purchase. It's serious, but it still should be fun and exciting. So that's one thing they taught me is you can't take everything so seriously all the time. And
that is right?
That
is a great lesson. Even a reminder.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So.
And then your father, I'm curious to know what lessons you learned from your father. And if there's opposing lessons learned from both your children and your father.
So he was much more serious, you know. So he wasn't like a harsh person. Like, I don't know if you ever heard the story of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he was growing up in Austria on the border of Germany. And it was during World War II. He was a little kid. And his dad was actually part of the Nazi party. But the mindset was crazy. It was like, if you did something wrong, you're going to go do 50 push-ups and then you can eat, right? And they had to do hard physical labor, like in the dark, 5 a.m, freezing cold, before they could eat. Little kids, you know. So my dad was not nearly that extreme. But he just he did not appreciate, you know, children being children, just being frivolous and goofing off. It was like, hey, we have deals to make. And to him, that was really exciting, you know, making deals. So I think, you know, a little bit of my rigidness and inability to relax comes from my dad. And that's conflict with my girls. But I learned so many great lessons from him. And one of the things I used to complain about was he didn't really teach me anything until he was dying of cancer.
You had mentioned that.
Yeah.
Did he have regrets with that?
He did. But, you know, in hindsight, I could see a lot of things that he taught me or was trying to teach me that I just, because I was a bit of a jerk and I just didn't take it seriously. And so he got discouraged and, you know, he's not going to tell me all about this deal he's working if I'm like bored and rolling my eyes and just want to go back to video games, right? So I think it was a little bit discouraging for him. So I think maybe my interaction with my teenage daughter is a bit of karma right now for that, you know. But he was such a smart businessman, and I regret it that I didn't take the time to listen, or he didn't take the time to teach me so many things until I had to go through that experience of losing all my money, right? And getting into conflicts with people that I should have at least used as allies. Like sometimes business at a high level is like a chess game. And it doesn't mean you want to use people or abuse people, but people can be temporary allies. Like, let's say, for example, you have a mortgage with the bank and it's a $2 million mortgage. And this is actual true story. You may not like the personality of the bank manager, but that is not a good enough reason to get into conflict with them. You know, you don't have to be best friends with them. You're not going to go play golf necessarily, although you probably should. But, you know, he understood how to pick your battles. You know, he was in many lawsuits, which my mom always complained about. But he chose strategically which lawsuits he was going to get into, you know? And so I just didn't understand that. Like as a younger man in my 20s and 30s, I just thought that if someone did something wrong, I had to retaliate, you know? I didn't really have the context or the wisdom to see like, this is a battle you should definitely take. This is one you should forget about.
Right.
You know? So there were so many things that he did that were just so wise in hindsight, but I didn't understand it at the time, you know?
Right.
Like how to make a deal, how to negotiate, you know? How to put pieces together to make a deal come together, you know, which is land development, which is something he did at the end of his life. He started to do, he would have been really great at it because it involves so many different aspects. Like we do real estate, but the developer has to deal with realtors, plus construction,
city,
plus the city, plus building inspectors, plus everything.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
The public.
Yeah, the public and the bank is a big thing, right? How do you finance this, right? It's very complicated legally. If you ever tried to read one of those disclosure statements that we give out,
right,
it's like dozens of pages. So a wise developer has read that entire thing. He could explain it to you, right? He's chosen the lawyer to write the thing because he trusts the lawyer and the lawyer knows what they're doing and they have a good working relationship. So he's got to have all these relationships and kind of be aware of all these facts and figures. It's really easy to lose a lot of money in business, right? And we saw this in Kelowna, like the 1151 Sunset was a different project before.
It was.
Right? And that developer couldn't make it. They didn't finish. So, you know, people think, oh, it's so easy, but it's one of the most complicated jobs there is. But he was just so good at seeing all the pieces on the chessboard and bringing people together and getting along with people that were difficult to get along with, which is something that I learned much later in life, you know? So
you look back and see all the wisdom he had, and then you look at how you've been able to gain that yourself through your own learnings. Learn the hard way. And, you know, for a long time, like when I recovered from poverty and losing everything,
I had a lot of pent up anger because I thought, why didn't he save me from this? Like, if he had taught me,
right,
I wouldn't have to go through this. But as soon as I stopped doing that, as soon as I stopped complaining, and I started to ask myself, what would my dad do in this situation? I was able to solve a lot of problems very quickly. You know?
Oh.
So.
Just the reframe.
Yeah, just reframe, like, what would he do? And I knew in many cases exactly what he would do because I saw it, you know? So instead of complaining, like, why didn't he teach me this? Well, he did teach me this. You know, I might have been too stubborn to listen or to notice at the time. But as soon as I reframed it, like, what would my dad do in this situation? I was able to solve a lot of problems.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Right.
And things started to rapidly change. So, you know, I think for a lot of people just holding resentment against our parents and stuff like that, it's usually a mistake.
It totally is. They usually did the best.
Yeah. For sure. They did the best with what they had.
Exactly.
But there's always a learning lesson. And, you know, it's so funny how patterns repeat. Like, I talk to my daughter the same way my dad talked to me, you know. But, I don't know. I try to do things different because I'm like, she has to know this stuff. She has to understand how money works. And she has to understand who you're supposed to show respect to. Like, being disrespectful is going to cause her a lot of misery in her future life. And I know this, right? But it's really hard to say this, right? It's hard to explain it. So one thing I've done, and it's a little nerdy, but with the YouTube app, you can download videos onto your phone so that you're not using data. So when you're on Wi-Fi, I will download a bunch of videos. And if I'm driving her to martial arts or to school or to a birthday party, I make her watch it. And if she complains, she can take the bus, but she doesn't complain. I make her watch it. And she usually just sits there and stares straight ahead, but I know it's like going into her head.
Yeah.
Right? But it's just about how to maximize your Instagram account because she's a photographer. She's amazing. She's amazing at it. But, you know, she doesn't have a concept of how do I really share this with people, right?
Right. Instagram would be great.
Yeah. So she's on Instagram.
Okay.
She is. But
we will tag her Instagram.
Yes, we will. But for most people, adults included, Instagram is like a toy. It's an entertainment thing, right? But her photography is so amazing that she should be a content producer, not just a content consumer. Right. And that's the difference between people who use social media as a tool, you know, to promote their business and to make connections, and those of us who just passively consume it and just, you know, flip through the news feed, and we waste so much time. 95% of us, most of the time, are just doing that.
Too much.
Right?
It's scary almost.
It is.
How sucked in people are starting to get.
Yeah. So I turned off notifications for everything except for the telephone and text messages. So even email, I don't get notifications anymore. I have to go check it.
Are you one of those people that have specific times in the day?
Yeah, I try to.
Okay.
I try to, but it's way better now because I totally forget about Facebook. And that's awesome. Because that little red bulb, like they designed it to give you a little trigger of dopamine. So if you post something, you're like, what, nobody liked it? And then you keep checking, but when you see that little red thing, you're like, maybe somebody commented. And it's designed to make you not put the device down, right? They do it on purpose. It's because they can sell more ads if you're watching it more.
You leverage social media pretty good. I do remember you were doing quite a few videos. Are you still doing? I've actually gone on almost a social media detox, a little bit of a cleanse.
Yeah.
So I'm not on there as much, so I don't know how active everybody else is. But are you finding that you're utilizing social media as a tool?
More so, yeah.
Okay.
And so the podcast I promote on there, I don't do as many videos.
Okay. Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do.
Okay.
But it's, I don't use it that much. So here's a little tip, though. If you're doing videos, you want to upload the video directly to Facebook and directly to YouTube. If you share a YouTube video on Facebook, Facebook will actually punish you. Less people will see it in your feed if it's a share from YouTube. If you post directly to Facebook, more people will see it.
Wow, did not know that.
Yeah, so if you do videos, if you want to do that, just upload it twice. That's the best way to do it.
Do you, and I noticed when I first came in, you have a lot, like I know you're a self-development junkie,
right,
like myself.
Yeah, totally.
Can you share some of that with me, with us? I mean, because you've done a lot of, I've noticed you have quite a phenomenal amount of resources just in there that I know you've tapped into.
Yeah. And
you're a wealth of knowledge yourself. So
sure.
How did you come about that? Was this always a passion of yours or more recently?
So I don't know if I told you the story of when I was delivering newspapers. So,
no, not yet.
So, I was like 41 years old and I was so broken. I was like, I got to do something. So I'm looking in the classifieds and it says delivery driver. So I call and it was the Daily Courier newspaper. They said, you got to start at 3 a.m. because this is mostly 55 plus complexes. They still like the printed paper. And I think it's great. I love the print paper. It's hard to find. It's hard to find now. But we're so stuck to devices that to have a nice book is a nice thing. So 55 plus complexes, typically townhouses, and I got to go door to door and deliver these papers, and they want it with their morning coffee. So I got to be finished by 7. So realistically, I got to get up at 3 because I got to pick up the papers, go over there. And I realized I had to be organized and sprint in order to make better than minimum wage. Because if I took my time and I was disorganized and forgot where I was going, if you divided the number of papers by the amount of time it took, it was less than minimum wage. It was terrible. So I decided, and the best decision I ever made in my life, I think, was I decided I've got to start listening to and watching stuff that makes me feel good. Because I love Seinfeld, for example. I love The Sopranos. But it's not something that makes me feel good, like enthusiastic. I don't want to bounce out of bed, after binging on Netflix 90% of the shows. And I realized that what we eat is so important. We know this. We talked about that on your interview. But what we take into our brains, to me, is even more important. Like, if our brains are healthy, we're going to make better decisions about food also. But everything, our relationships, our business, our ability to sell, our ability to negotiate, to be optimistic, right? To see opportunities for business really depends on what we're feeding our brains with, right? It's the most powerful instrument in the universe. And we just feed it junk all the time. So it's like junk food, right? I love Doritos, right? But if I eat that all the time, I'm going to be lethargic and sick eventually. And I think mental food is the exact same way. It, we don't get sick instantaneously, but it makes us lethargic and mentally lazy and sloppy in our thinking, right? So, and I was so scared. I was afraid. That was the overpowering emotion, was afraid. Like, I didn't know how I was going to pay rent. I didn't know how I was going to be able to feed my daughter. So I thought, I better listen to something positive because I was afraid. So, but it started to make me feel really good. And I started to get ideas. And so I'm calculating, okay, I can carry 8 newspapers because it's the Friday edition and it's got all the flyers and all the junk mail in it. So I can carry 8 without like fumbling. And I'm going to do these 8 townhouses in a row. I grab them. But I would pause the audio in my car. And then I forgot where I was. I got to back up a bit. So I decided, instead of doing that, I rolled down all 4 windows, cranked up the heat, and I turned the volume full blast on the audio. So I'm delivering newspapers and in these seniors complexes, and I could swear like I could see lights go on, and I'm sure there was like some old couple saying, honey, I must be dreaming, but I think Tony Robbins is in the parking lot, you know? And, but it really started to make me excited. And one of the things I learned was gratitude.
Yes.
Gratitude. So gratitude actually changes your brain chemistry. Similar to the way humor does. They say if you're depressed, you watch a comedy, it can really help, right? Mm-hmm. If you're feeling sick, like physically sick, watching a comedy can really help, right? So, you know, that book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, yes. That's the concept, is just changing your chemistry can really change your perspective on things. So, I
just love Jack Canfield. I
right?
Just have to
he's
throw it
one
out
of my
there.
favorites.
He's an OG.
He's amazing.
Anyway.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
So somebody said on one of these audios, you know, a gratitude practice will actually change your brain chemistry. So I get home and we were living in West Kelowna, and it was kind of an older house, and we had 3 adults, 2 teenagers, or 2 children. Neither were teenagers. And about 7 animals. And Olivia and I had 2 mattresses on the floor. No furniture. All our clothes were like stacked up in little piles. And I was like, what is there to be grateful for? Like, this is just so terrible, right? But I stood on the deck and the sun was coming up. It's like 6:30 in the morning. And I could see the sunrise, which we usually don't get to see. The sun's coming up over Dilworth and over Knox Mountain and the ridge up by Rutland. And I was like, this is so beautiful. This is amazing. And I just did that for 5 minutes every morning. And all of a sudden, I look at my car and I'm like, hey, I have a car that works. I could use this car for something, right? And I'm scrolling through my news feed and I see that Greyhound has banned taking pets on the Greyhound. Now, I believe if I did not feel gratitude towards my crappy old car, that I wouldn't even notice that article, because I'd be thinking the car's going to get repossessed. Like, it's a piece of junk. Like, I'm a loser. But instead, I'm like, hey, this is actually a money-making asset. And I see this article. You cannot take your puppy or your kitten on Greyhound anymore. So I was like, oh my God. So I post ads on Kijiji and Castanet. My phone starts ringing like crazy. Now I'm taking humans and pets all over the province for hundreds of dollars. Just like that. And I believe 100% that's because I started to feel gratitude towards my car instead of looking at it as a symbol of my failure. But it was something, hey, I managed to keep this car. Mm-hmm. It still works, right? And I'm grateful for that. And now I see opportunities where I used to only see problems, right? So that's just one of the things. And I have always noticed, like, you have up days and down days. Yes. If I'm not feeding my brain with something like Jack Canfield, it's definitely worse. Mm-hmm. Things are definitely better. Even if you're busy and you're like doing laundry and stuff like that, I have that playing in the background all the time. And it's just great.
We connected, I remember, when we went for coffee last year. Mm-hmm. But let's touch on that. Let's touch a little bit on mental health.
Sure.
If you're comfortable about touching on it.
Definitely.
Have you had any experiences with it that you would like to share? And is it something that you felt through your whole entire life? Or was there an onset? I mean, you did have quite a few, I'd say, challenges and bumps along the way.
Mm-hmm. So part of the thing, like I've done so much reading. Mm-hmm. I think for most of my life, since I was about 12, I've read about 200 pages a day.
Wow. Now,
most of that now is on my phone and my Twitter feed. Like, I'm really into politics and stuff like that. And Twitter is super addictive. I don't know if you know much about it, but it's like a spider web of conversations that is infinite. So it's totally public unless you block someone. And so someone makes a comment and someone famous, right? And then they'll have 3,000 comments. And each of those comments will have sub-comments.
Right.
And then that'll lead you to someone else's page. And it's like this massive spider web of conversations 24/7, 365 days. So I waste a lot of time there. But I've always been reading stuff. And my belief is that as humans, we try to put things into rigid categories. You know, oh, this person's bipolar, this person has borderline personality. Mm-hmm. And I think that we exist on a spectrum. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. So
you can diagnose someone, but it's not like being pregnant or having cancer, like you have it or you don't. So you could have tendencies, like we all have mood swings.
I think we all have tendencies of, yeah,
exactly. Right? We can all be depressed, but does that mean you're clinically depressed and need, harsh treatments, Mm-hmm. Borderline personality is defined by like very extreme mood swings and abrupt mood swings and a feeling of being abandoned, but then causing the circumstances to push people away. Mm-hmm. Famous book on borderline personality disorder is I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. That's the title of the book, because that kind of encapsulates the mindset of someone suffering from borderline. But I think we've all had mood swings. We've all said things we regret, right? We've all, you could look at any type of mood disorder or personality disorder or psychiatric disorder. We've all done something on that list at some point in our life, right? Mm-hmm. Expressed anger that we regret, said foolish things. So I've never been diagnosed with anything, but as a self-diagnosis, I would say the closest that I would relate to is manic depression or bipolar. So I go through phases where I'm super excited, like super excited. And I can stay up all night working on a project, And then other times where it's kind of hard to get out of bed, And that was more severe before. Part of the self-help stuff really taught me to take responsibility, right? So if I'm feeling down, I know mental diet, physical diet, getting exercise, trying to think positive doesn't necessarily mean it's an instant cure. But if I'm not doing everything I can, within reason, right? Like part of the thing is we beat ourselves up. Like we say, oh, I should be doing so much better. I should be, but just a little bit. Like, you know what? I could use an extra glass of water, right? Little things. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to change the channel. I'm watching the news too much. It's depressing. I'm just going to, little decisions like that and kind of bring me out of it, But I would say that was the closest thing. I do go through phases where I just feel lethargic and I don't want to do anything. And other phases where I'm so excited and I want to tell everybody. And when I was younger, especially, people would be like, hey, we got it. You're really excited. You're really enthusiastic, A person who's diagnosed as bipolar, they can actually get into trouble. Like there was a movie with that actor, what's his name? It's called Mr. Jones, and it's from the 1990s. Very famous, handsome actor. It'll come to me. Anyways, plays a bipolar person, and he gets so excited he'll like walk out on the scaffolding and stuff like that, and jump on stage in the middle of a theater production, right? And they got to give him drugs to bring him back down to earth. And I never got into that much trouble, although as a teenager I did have some incidents. Like I got into a shouting match with the manager of a McDonald's because we were teenagers and we were drinking inside the McDonald's. Oh. And I just thought, well, everybody's watching me, so this is my chance to...
It's your time to shine.
And then other times I'm like, that is just so stupid. I want to crawl into a cave, So with maturity, and I think just feeding my brain with healthier stuff, like I don't get into trouble anymore for, saying too much.
I agree with you with this whole stigma. I think there is a huge spectrum. I think that some people display some tendencies, and it's also level of awareness.
Yeah.
When a person has so much self-awareness and you're so self-aware, you can almost highlight on things.
Right.
Which, in fact, make it, I was saying it's less worse than it is, but anyway. And then going back to what you're feeding yourself on the daily, do you have a routine that you do?
So I find it really hard to stick to schedules. That's why Kara does the schedule for the podcast. So I try to make it like a habit. So if I'm craving a coffee, I go make a coffee. So it's like building up an appetite,
right?
You know? And what I tell the girls is, you think it's foolish now, but you're going to develop an appetite for it. Like, I love broccoli and asparagus. I hated it when I was a kid. I love whiskey. I hated it when I was a kid, right? So you can build a taste for things that are really good, you know? Yeah. It's not like I'm trying to punish you. This, to me, mentally is really delicious. Like, this is amazing stuff, and you're going to get to that point. You know, if I don't know. I don't do it as a punishment. I'm just like, well, it's my card and I'm giving you a ride. And this is what I'm listening to. Just like if it was the radio station, right? If you're giving someone a ride, they're not going to go, you know what? I hate country and western. Shut that off. And you're driving them. You'd be like, well, that's kind of disrespectful. Yeah.
Be grateful for this ride.
Exactly. So yeah, it's just something I just try to like, oh, I need a glass of water. I need a cup of coffee. Like, I need some mental food. So I don't have a strict schedule. Okay. But I try to, you know, first thing I put into my ears is that.
Right. Just positivity.
Yeah.
Good vibes.
Yeah. And it's not all necessarily positivity, but just like, here's how to negotiate a really tough deal. You know, here's how to get, cultivate leads when the market is slow, you know, like practical things too. Right. Not just always feel good stuff, you know?
Positive learnings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
And on the same topic of learnings and lessons, I did want to touch back on the hurricane. And then let's talk about you moving forward. Yeah. I feel like we kind of we had to go so quickly to get just through your life in a short 2 segments. So I want to talk about your book in a bit, but before that, the hurricane being a part of that entire societal trauma, I guess you could even say, like how that impacted you, the people around you. Did that in any way change the trajectory of your life after experiencing something so severe? Yeah.
You know, It could be, in hindsight, one of the things that helped me survive. So I think I touched on the fact that I lost $1 million twice, but the second time was harder because the bills kept accumulating. And the hurricane, I felt like it was a natural disaster, so there was very little I could have done to prevent it, and I was able to rebuild. So each day got a little bit better with cleaning up the site and, you know. But I learned so many things from that. Like, first of all, insurance. Like, I learned all about the insurance industry, you know. I never read an insurance policy before. I thought it was basically a scam, you know. I had some minor car accidents in the past, and they're like, well, we're not going to cover that because there was a previous scratch. And my dad used to have a saying, they don't build these glass skyscrapers in Toronto and Calgary and Vancouver by giving you a great deal, right? They're some of the most powerful institutions, richest institutions, because they make money off the insurance in spite of natural disasters. Now, that doesn't mean it's a scam. It means that people need to read their contracts, right? And get the correct coverage. And it's almost intentionally designed to be so tedious and so thick with legal terminology that 99.9% of people are not going to read it because they're like, I have to pay it. The bank says I have to pay it. That's it. forget about it. But when you're a land developer, if you own significant property, I learned from the hurricane that you need to read that, right? I can't imagine any land developer not understanding how insurance works. Top to bottom, inside and out, exactly what he's paying for, right?
Right.
So I read everything now, you know? You know how hard it is when we try to get people to read their contract.
Right.
They're like, Andrea, I trust you, just show me where to sign. I don't want to read it. Now, it's designed to protect them. 99 times out of 100, nothing's going to go wrong. But they are consumers. There's nothing wrong with that. But they're not builders. They're not land developers, right? And that is the difference, right? Knowing who all the players are, how the money works, how the money flows, how are you going to get paid if a hurricane comes and wipes this building out, right? What are the restrictions on getting paid? How much are you going to get paid? One thing we noticed in the Cayman Islands was the cost of everything went up by about 25% because there was so much demand. Everybody wanted electricity and air conditioning and new windows, and it was a building boom. But if you wanted it fast, you had to pay more. And it was really interesting. It was like seeing an entire economy unfold, like a decade's worth of activity in 6 months. And that's how intense it was. And just learning everything, learning about negotiation. And I don't know if I told you this story, but here's one of the ways I got out of this. So there's a concept in insurance called underinsurance. So let's say I think my building's worth $1 million. I'll buy $1 million worth of insurance. The adjuster comes after the hurricane and says, you know what, your building is actually worth $1.2 million. Therefore, you only had about 85% of the coverage that you needed. So if your loss is $500,000, we're only going to give you 85% of it because you chose to insure the extra $200,000 yourself. So we're only going to proportionally give you what you actually had covered. Now, nobody on the island knew what the hell they were talking about when they first said this, but it's right there in the contract. Okay. So this is one example of where you're screwed. You have no rent coming in. It's like, oh my God. So these American guys from the southern United States came and they said to me, we are insurance adjusters. We work for American companies. However, in this case, we're going to work for you. So we know all about insurance adjusting. We'll read your policy. We'll build a case. We'll go to your insurance company. And we will say, if we go to court, we will represent Luke on a contingency basis. He's not paying us anything. Here's everything you're going to have to pay us, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages, because you're not allowed to hang someone out to dry for 6-12 months when they're trying to rebuild. And this is what it's going to cost you if we have to take you to court. However, take 20% off and get us a check by next Friday, and we'll settle this thing. And that's what they did for me. And I had to pay them 10%. I had to write a check to this guy for $55,000. But I got my check the next week. And it was totally worth it. Now, just think about that. $55,000. You could ask any person, is it worth it to you to spend 20 hours, 30 hours reading your policy to make your own $55,000? Like, write yourself that check. That was very painful, but I had to do it because that's what it was worth to me, you see? So that's the kind of knowledge that people just skim over. They don't think it's important, but he knew my policy inside and out, and he was able to go to the insurance company and say, here's what you're facing if we go to court. We want to check by next Friday and we can settle this thing. And they said, absolutely. And people were waiting months and months for their checks, you see. So I was glad to pay him $55,000 to do it.
Well, for sure. Even in the jargon within the policy.
Exactly.
I mean, he's an expert. He probably.
Totally.
I think it's worth, given the fact that you probably wouldn't have even gotten that amount, you would have probably been
it was great.
Dry. Yeah.
It was great. So the bank was threatening to foreclose. They said, you missed your October 1st, 2004 mortgage payment.
And this isn't the building in the Cayman Islands.
This is the building in the Cayman Islands.
Yes.
This is the building in the Cayman Islands. And I said, well, my roof is in the parking lot. Tenants can't pay rent. They're like, we don't care. You have a mortgage. That's not our problem, right? So I was really nervous. I was down to a few $100s, but I hooked up with these guys that got me a really quick settlement. And I had one suit because of my brother's funeral. I went and bought a suit. And I went to the Royal Bank of Canada and to Scotiabank, 2 Canadian banks in the Cayman Islands. And I said, here's our insurance settlement. Here's my proposal to rebuild. And they were competing over me to get that mortgage to refinance the building. And so I went to the local bank with a check to pay off my mortgage because they were sending me nasty emails. And they're like, there's no way you can get out of this, and blah, blah, blah. But I was negotiating and I got my insurance settlement. And then I had 2 banks competing to refinance. I went with RBC and they cut me a check. I think there was, I don't know, $1 million and change left on the old mortgage. And I walked into the bank manager and I said, here's your... And he was like, oh, all nice and everything. Can I get you a coffee? And it was hilarious. But that was exciting, you see, because I was scared, but I was making progress and, being able to walk into the bank. Someone accusing you of being irresponsible, bad person, didn't pay your mortgage, walking in with a check for $1 million, $2 million or whatever, and handing it to him. And just seeing the look on his face. I mean, that was like one of the best days. One of the best days ever, I didn't have too many days like that after Nelson. It was like, I got a $10 tip so I can put some gas in the car, and do my next delivery. It was like tiny victories, but yeah.
Victories nonetheless.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, at this point, moving forward, what are some of your hopes, dreams, and goals?
So my mentor, John May. John May was a realtor with Century 21 in the Cayman Islands, and I met him in 1997 with my dad on my first trip to the Cayman Islands. And he grew up 15 minutes apart from my dad in Toronto, but they never met until they got to the Cayman Islands. And my dad got really sick shortly after that. John kind of became like my father, and he taught me everything I know about real estate. And he used to say to me, you know what, Luke, you're so smart. You're going to be a land developer one day. So I just know it. And after Nelson, I would hear his words in my ears and I would hate it. I would be like, I'm a failure. Like if he was alive today, if my dad was alive today, they'd be so disappointed, But I've started to allow those words to kind of come back again. And that's something I've always dreamed about. I paid for a lot of architects' drawings. Let's put it that way. The building in the Cayman Islands, I was the general contractor at the end of it. So another quick story was the bank said I have to hire a licensed contractor and a quantity surveyor who's an independent person who goes and says, yeah, he's put up 62 sheets of drywall and 500 screws and 10 gallons of paint. You can pay this next payment. Well, either they were in cahoots or the quantity surveyor was overwhelmed, but there was a total fraud. I went to get the final electrical inspection. Turn on a light switch, nothing happens. Turn on another switch, nothing happens. The electrical inspector starts taking plates off. There's no wires. No wires in the whole building. So it was about $200,000 fiasco because we had to rip all the floors and walls out.
Oh.
There was no conduit. There was nothing.
What a nightmare.
So it was like, $15,000 worth of electrical.
All the drywall too.
And then all drywall, tiles, paint, hardwood floors, everything. Jackhammering. I mean, there was no electricity done. This building was done, completed.
I have a personal, and you get this too, when you just get something, it's just a thing. I don't know if it's like an OCD thing but when you just see something that's been newly constructed and it's done, and then for whatever reason, it just needs to be all torn up again.
Yeah.
Whether...
Oh, it's horrible. It's terrible.
But an entire building.
But I went to the bank manager and I said, listen, we have a situation. And I said, I've talked to all the trades except for the electrician. He's been fired, and I've called the police, and police say they probably can't do anything about it. But because he took cash advances to like buy electrical components, which he didn't buy. Yeah. And I said, I believe I can complete this project. I'm going to be the general contractor. I've fired the general, and we need $200,000 to finish it. And the bank manager looked at me like, are you fucking kidding me? And I was like, no. And I had all the document, I went in prepared, but I was like, this is a big script. He goes, okay. So he gave me another $200,000, and I was the general contractor, and I finished it. I got through the inspections and everything. So I learned general contracting. So I thought I was a genius by the time I got to Nelson, and then we talked about that.
Yeah.
So since then, I've been able to buy a piece of land in the Cayman Islands. It's small. And it's something I always wanted to do. It's one of the reasons I joined our company, is not because I'm trying to take over from the developers, but I want to be around it.
Yeah, to get more of that influence of the new development.
Exactly.
For sure.
I want to see how they do it. I want to see how they make their decisions. It's something that I've always loved. Like, I love real estate. I love selling.
Yeah.
But I love the big picture stuff, because to me, anything you see, from a house to a apartment block, started as a concept in someone's head, and you had to have dozens of people, the good connection between their left brain and their right brain, the creativity side, but the logical side, like, we gotta have the correct insurance policy, right? We can't overpay for insurance, because then that takes money away from the faucets that we can have, right?
Yeah.
And just being able to do the mathematics of it, but also have a creative vision. We've walked into developments where it's kind of like, it's a little bit shabby, It's a little bit shabby. Like, I would have done it different. I have that thought a lot.
For
Not
sure.
like an arrogant thing, but just like, why didn't they?
Yeah. Or who was thinking about this? Like, what was the thought behind this?
Yeah.
Whether it be floor plan or even finishings, because from inception to when it actually does get constructed, I mean, there's changes in preferences. Like, is this more of a timeless finish, or was it more of an entree? Yeah, we get a lot of feedback. So
my dad had a dream to retire in the Cayman Islands and do some building. He did a 28-lot subdivision in Mississauga, just west of Ontario, Toronto. And he was going to be a developer in the Cayman Islands and play a lot of golf. And then he got sick, right? So I kind of feel like I'm taking up where he left off. It's hard not to think I wasted 20 years, 22 years, because I could have just started in 97, continuing what he was doing. But I wasn't ready, So I want to take up where he left off.
And in that being said, was it truly a waste, or do you feel like, because you've been talking about a book, and it seems like you have so much you can share.
Right.
That hopefully if people listen, you can save them some pain and heartache as well.
Totally.
So do you feel like it's a waste, or do you feel like you're going to be able to utilize all these lessons and really turn it into something moving forward? You've expressed, so let's talk about the book that you've been mentioning you're going to be writing.
Yeah.
Is there a date set, or are you just thinking about it? Tell me more about this book.
I should set a date, because we know what procrastination is like. If we don't have a target, it's
right.
Someday is always in the future, right? And it never comes. So, like, definitely there are so many great lessons. Like, the foreclosure in Nelson was the most personally humiliating thing that I ever went through. However, just from listening to audio They said a new realtor has to build relationships with people. And even if you don't like networking, you got to network. So I thought, why don't I try to make friends with mortgage people, because they're in the profession. And at least, even if I don't get any referrals from them, at least I can refer to them. And I can tell my clients, look, I've got a network of great people and I know them and I'm friends with them and they're great at what they do. So I started to do that. Because when you're starting out, you have a lot of extra time, right? And it's like, do you want to just pay thousands of dollars for print ads or do you want to go out and talk to people, right? So I became friends with a guy named Mark.
You want to go out and talk to people, by the way.
That's right. Exactly. So Mark from TD Bank and I became pretty good friends. And wouldn't you know it, 2013, there was still a lot of foreclosures happening in the Okanagan. And people just getting too far behind on their mortgage.
2013?
Yeah, 2013, wow. 2014, there were still quite a few foreclosures.
I did not know that.
Well, Mark liked me so much that every time one came across his desk, and it would come from Toronto, TD Bank, and they would say, please select a local realtor to handle this. So between TD Bank and one or two from CIBC, but about 10 from TD Bank, I handled about a dozen foreclosure sales where I could help other people, There was a guy in Beaverdale, for example, and they're like, it's a bit of a drive. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. So I go down there and this guy's like, my wife got sick and I had to take time off work and we got behind and the bank's being so harsh with us. And I could empathize with him and I could tell him, here's exactly what's going to happen. Here's how long it's going to take, right? Here's,
You must have so much empathy, too.
So much empathy.
People going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wasn't hurting the bank's interests,
Right.
Like the bank wants me to sell it for as much money as possible. But you still got to treat the other people with respect,
yes. And you knew how it felt.
Exactly.
As you went through it.
Yeah, so I almost felt like a cop, like coming into a situation,
no one's gonna feel
and it's
good
like
about saying they're foreclosing on their
right.
house.
I know how that feels internally.
Right.
It's like you feel like you screwed up. This is your family home.
How did it come to this?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Probably.
So I would always tell people, listen, I went through it, so I can tell you what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to show it when it's inconvenient for you. I'm going to, we're going to work together. And in that case, in Beaverdale, I gave him some ideas and he talked to some private lenders and he was able to pay off TD Bank and save the house. So I didn't get a commission on that one, but he was so grateful. And someone came because they saw my sign on his fence and said, listen, is it still for sale? And he said, no, I was in foreclosure, but I paid off the bank. But he said, you should call Luke because he's a great guy. Luke had this listing. He hasn't picked up a sign yet, but you should call Luke. And that couple called me. They were moving from Peachland to Beaverdale for whatever reason. And I was able to sell them a house. You know what I mean? So.
And were they lovely? Was it an
easy and super
cool.
sweet?
I
Is
love
that nice?
I love that. That's a universe thing. It's like yeah. That's awesome.
And
so, you in touch with them still?
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, they're great. And so it was just, I was like, what possible good can come from losing your property through a court proceeding?
Right.
Right. And when you have all these dreams of being a land developer and being, a real estate person and a landlord and, what possible good can come? Well, I did 12 foreclosure deals. So I made a good chunk of commission. But I was also able to, like Mark said, you've been through this. You understand the process. You're not a realtor that's never been through a foreclosure where I got to teach you every damn aspect of it. I could just hand you the file and you're good to go. So I was like, wow, I'm actually qualified to handle foreclosures because I went through it.
I think on the other side, on a more human level, it would be nice for somebody whose house is foreclosing to deal with somebody who said, you know what, I've actually been through this. So they're not feeling so alone, as embarrassed.
Right.
I think on a very human level, You can realize you've touched them in a way. Like, I think it would have been a more pleasant experience for somebody going through that.
Or less painful.
Less painful. Yeah.
Did
I say pleasant? Nothing about that is pleasant, but pleasant. I mean more a less painful.
Yeah.
Yes,
one of the things I felt like, when you're rich, you have a lot of people that kind of collect around you because you're rich, right? And that was one of the things I had to confront too, was like...
that's a great... Yeah,
I had to confront, like, okay, I've lost all these so-called friends.
Did you notice that? Was it a quick, like, or did they just drop like flies, or...
It was a bit of both,
Okay.
Some that you could say, oh yeah, that person, was a real user, and they disappeared instantly, and others would kind of fade, over time. But nobody could relate. Like, I didn't know anybody who inherited a bunch of money, lost a building to a hurricane, learned general contracting, bought a building, and then was almost homeless as a result. Like, I couldn't find anyone. Like, if I even talked to an empathetic person, they'd be like, yeah, that's crazy. I can't even imagine, because they couldn't imagine it, because I couldn't find anyone that went through that, So I just thought that if someone just to hear the words like, hey, I've been through exactly what you're going through right now, because the bank doesn't care. And the realtor usually doesn't care, because everybody's got a job to do. Doesn't mean they're jerks or trying to be mean, but they can't empathize because they haven't been through it. They don't know what you're going through, and it's not their job to worry about what you're going through, right? So to me, that was really good. Really, really good. If I could just give someone just a little bit of hope, like, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This emotional and financial situation is not going to last forever. There are other people out there that have gone through exactly what you're going through. And I'm one, I can tell you what to expect. Part of the thing, when you get sick or financially sick, part of the fear is you don't know what's coming next. You don't know what's going to happen. You're just looking at the phone, it's going to ring, and you jump out of your chair, and you're like, oh my God. And I could tell them, here's what's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen for 3 months. They have to go to court, right? And courts are backed up, and here's what's going to happen next. And here's what's going to happen next, right? And they'd be like, oh, okay. So I can actually go play golf today and forget about it. I don't have to worry about it today or about it tomorrow, So that was really nice.
Back to your book.
Yeah.
Can't forget about that. Is it something that you've sat at your computer and tried to start, or have you been working on it piece by piece? Do you know how to, is this something that
I've started and stopped many times. And so I learned something on a podcast, I think it was Stephen King, the horror writer. And he said, don't throw it out. Even if you are 100% certain it's absolute crap, don't throw it out. If you need to start again and start something different, that's fine, but don't ever throw it out. So my problem has been a few problems. One, I don't know exactly what the topic is.
Right.
Two, it brings up old memories.
Right.
When my self-esteem wasn't as good. And then I start to get into a negative thought spiral, and I'm like, nobody wants to hear that. That was a failure. Nobody wants to hear it. And then I put it out of my head, and I get busy with other stuff, right? But I think this conversation has helped a lot, just to kind of flesh out some of these ideas. And I think it would be about relationships. That really, relationships are the most important thing there is. Right. Starting with the relationship we have with ourselves. How do we view ourselves, How do we view mistakes that we make? How do we deal with them? Right? And once you get that figured out, it's much easier to deal with other people. And then understanding the insurance adjuster is playing a role. It's a giant financial game, and everybody's playing a role. And the more you understand about all those pieces, the easier it is to navigate and choose your path, which way you want to go. If you don't know what the hell is happening, right? Bank's calling you saying you're late. You don't know what's going to happen, right? But if you understand everything from start to finish, right? It took 2 years for me to get into trouble till I had to hand the keys over to that building. 2 years. 2 years, right? When the phone rings for the first time, you don't know what to expect, right?
Right.
So just understanding, all the players in this great financial game we've got going on really helps. I think it really helps.
And the length of the time of the process too.
Yeah.
Your life isn't over tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I had a question here. What do you think many people would be surprised to know about you? I feel like the entire 2 segments of this pod, I feel like a lot of people really got to know you much more deeply and in many more aspects. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you think people would be surprised to know about you?
I think when people get to know me, they are often surprised that I'm really an introvert, right? So if I'm on the podcast or I see you at a networking event, I'm extroverted because I'm supposed to be.
Right.
Right? I remember 20 years ago in the Cayman Islands, I broke up with someone and I went to my favorite bar and I was telling one of my buddies there, oh my God, she's so bad and she didn't return my phone calls and blah, blah, blah. He says to me, hey, he says, don't bring that shit to the bar. I said, why not? He says, nobody wants to hear it. And it was very painful for me to hear that, right?
Yeah.
But it was a lesson like, hey, man, everything is context. It doesn't mean don't call a friend if you need to talk, but it just means understand the context. So if I'm at a networking event, I've tried to learn how to make conversations and how to be effective at a networking event. And I think people are really surprised when they realize my preference in life is to be on the couch with a cup of coffee or a glass of whiskey and reading a book. I vastly prefer that. But again, we're all on a spectrum. So some days more extroverted.
Right.
But I'm really an introvert. And I think that's the thing that surprises people the most about me.
Okay. So you're an extroverted introvert.
Well, I'm an extrovert when I need to be.
Yeah. Okay.
But just as a personal preference.
Yes.
I kind of prefer not to ever go to a networking event, to be honest. Not because I dislike people.
Right.
But because I prefer to read than to just. But these conversations are great. Mm-hmm. Most events that I've been to, it's kind of more superficial. How are you? How you feeling? Right. Nice weather. What do you do? Oh, that's nice. Do you know Bob? Yeah, I know Bob, right? Do you want another drink? No, I'm good. You know what I mean? It's just, to me, it's kind of trivial.
Where's the finger food?
Yeah, exactly. It's okay. And I can take it in small doses. Just
Is there any shrimp cocktail left?
That's right. Yeah. To me, it seems like we've talked for the last 2 hours about so much drama in my life. And a lot of it's really exciting and interesting. And to me, where's the shrimp cocktail is just not, it's not satisfying. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so great to be able to interview you.
Thank you.
I knew that there was so much depth to you as a person. And even from this interview, so many more things came out. Mm-hmm. So I'll be excited. And I think a lot of the listeners will be excited to, when your book comes out, read about some more learning, some more details.
I should start today.
We went so quickly. But yeah, I think that although you did mention you kind of, a part of you feels like, you asked this question, did I waste the last 22 years? I don't think so. I think you actually gained a lot of wisdom that you can pass on to help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think that it's almost good you went through this now so that if you're planning to build a development in the Cayman Islands, you are likely, the likelihood of you effing up. This is a clean show, right? So effing up. Yeah. Sometimes it's good to throw a little F-bomb. Anyway, so,
I like F-bombs.
I'm just interested. I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think I should start the book immediately and just come up with the basic theme, and then you build the skeleton.
So I wonder.
And you have a schedule.
Feedback.
You have to have a schedule.
I wonder if you can get listener feedback.
Yeah.
On maybe I think, okay, here's what I propose. You actually do more of a
interactive show. So
or even you do a book on just even lessons of you could focus on land development, some of the lessons, but how inadvertently it all ties. Have you ever read that book, Buy It by the Acre, Sell It by the Foot?
No.
It's an old school book, but it's a cool book that you should definitely read. Buy It by the Acre, Sell It by the Foot. And it's just an old school, it's a developer.
Nice.
I think you'd like it. It's an easy read too. It's a fun.
Cool.
Yeah. He says either developers, don't listen if you're a developer. This isn't true. I'm not saying it's true, but he says, this is what he said, quoting from him, that, developers are either living in palatial mansions or they're scrounging to find their next meal. Like he was just saying the sways between the two and even getting comfortable with the idea of that there could be.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen it happen, right? Where you think you can't make any mistakes because you just made $1 million from, putting things together, and how you're going to make a mistake, right? I mean, I think, there is definitely a lot of benefit, and I'm better equipped as a father, I think, for one thing, because I know the great things my dad taught me and the mistakes that he made, doing his best, and I've forgiven him for those things. So I'm in a much better position now. If I was still, with the Swiss bank account and arrogant and believing nobody can teach me anything and not having, a certain sense of humbleness, I wouldn't be as good of a dad.
You would have been a shit person. I mean, now it's like you'll be a good person and you can, anyway. Yeah, well.
I really appreciate your time. And I might split it into 3 because it's, 45 minutes. Now we got an hour 6.
That was a really, okay, so you can cut all this out now. But that was a really good, I felt like that was really good flow too.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like you didn't waste anything. And I feel like even the first part of our podcast, it was almost like you had to kind of power through it just to get out all the stuff. But even if you, in your book, were to expand on that, in more of a time, even, and then leaving it open, I'm just excited for you, Luke.
I think the biggest question in my head is who is the audience? Because I'm confident that any story I tell you from 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it's an interesting story. I can tell the story effectively. But I need to figure out who the audience is in order to be able to write the book. And so who am I writing it for?
So Lewis Howes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he did, he was talking about exactly that. Building the audience before you write the book to make sure there's any interest to write the book. And I don't know if you have a capture where you're starting to collect email addresses and growing your list from your podcast. I don't know how, but and we can talk more about that because I'm all about automation and doing that. But you can even start, I don't know, but if there's any way that you can get the feedback. But there's so much value there, whether you even want to just direct it specifically on business. And how much, like even from what you've told me, the importance of really knowing policies inside and out. And knowing everything inside and out. Like really. Like don't just because I think a lot of people, they think and then even that, you don't, even when you think don't think you know.
Right. Yeah.
Because life might just.
Well, awareness is such an amazing thing. It's like, what was that now? 15 years ago. So an insurance adjuster comes at me and I'm thinking this person is a jerk, right? There's so much, we're talking about millions of dollars here. It's not just this person is a jerk. It's like, what is the role? What are my legal rights? What is the financial situation? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's such a much more complex thing. It's the awareness.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway. Oh, hi, you guys.
The next guest,
yeah. Awesome. Well,
thank you, Andrea. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Luke.
You're a very easy person to talk to. So I think if we just did like 10 or 15 of these, then I could have them transcribed. And there's your book.
Could do that, actually.
You know, there's a great service, rev.com. I think I told you.
Yes.
If you're doing videos, they'll transcribe it for $1 a minute. And you can put closed captioning on your videos so you get more eyeballs. You know, if someone's listening on the bus or at work, they don't want to put the audio on and they can see the text. Mm-hmm. And a 5-minute video costs you $5 to get that done. So like these interviews, I could have them transcribed.
And even build from there.
There's a lot of good content there. Yeah. So thank you. Great questions.
Thanks, Luke. It was fun. It was really fun to interview you.
You've been listening to I Love Kelowna. We love where we live. And how can you not? With all the provincial parks, pine forests, vineyards, orchards, mountains. On each show, we have in-depth, intimate conversations with entrepreneurs, execs, thought leaders, and creatives, all that make up Kelowna. You can support the show so we can keep producing by going to paypal.me/Luke Menkes. And make sure to visit the official website at ilovekelowna.buzzsprout.com. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. And we hope you had some fun along the way. We'll be back soon. Until then, this is I Love Kelowna signing off.